All of the evidence against me right now is very compelling.
What really happened in there?
The brutal of her boyfriend. It opened yesterday.
It began as a romance between two attractive, ambitious people. A love story born at a work conference that quickly turned into something far more complicated.
It built within a matter of minutes.
From the outside, Travis Alexander and Jodi Arias seemed like a natural match, charming, driven, and deeply connected. But beneath the surface, their relationship was volatile, marked by passion, jealousy, and secrets neither was willing to let go of. What happened next would grip the nation. A brutal killing in a quiet Arizona suburb, an investigation full of twists, and a trial that blurred the line between justice and entertainment. Over months in court, intimate details of their private lives were laid bare, sparking fierce debate, public obsession, and a media frenzy unlike anything the state had seen.
Describing for the first time what she says happened the day of the...
I witnessed Travis being attacked by two other individuals.
Who?
I don't know who they were.
This is the story of how a love affair unraveled into betrayal, violence, and a spectacle that would leave both the jury and the public struggling to make sense of it all.
Alexander.
I absolutely did not kill Travis Alexander. I had nothing to do with his. I didn't harm him in any way.
The fatal attraction of Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander. Jodi Ann Arias came into the world on July 9, 1980, in Salinas, California. She was the daughter of William and Sandra Arias, the kind of small-town family where life wasn't glamorous, but moved along in its own quiet rhythm. Jodi's teenage years were uneven. She left Wairika Union High School in 11th grade, chasing independence before she'd finished her education. She drifted through odd jobs, trying to find her place, until she picked up a camera and began calling herself an aspiring photographer. Eventually, she landed a sales role with Prepaid Legal Services, or PPL, the same job that would lead her to Travis. Travis, Victor Alexander, had his own story long before Jodi entered it. Born July 28, 1977, in Riverside, California, he was the son of Gary and Pamela Alexander. His early years were unstable, and by the age of 8, he was living with his paternal grandparents. After his father died in 1997, Travis's grandmother took in all 7 of his siblings. He found refuge in faith, joining the church and trying to steer his life in a better direction. Before that change, he'd told friends, he often got into fights. But Travis also had a lighter side, a sense of humor he channeled into stand-up comedy, performing under the alter ego Eddie Snell. By the time he met Jodi, he was building a career as a salesman and motivational speaker for PPL, the kind of man who could hold a room with both his words and his smile. They were two people from very different pasts, colliding at a moment that would seem, at first, like fate, and in time, prove fatal.
I'd like to share with you an exciting new thigh cream that I learned about just recently. It's called Possum Balm.
It was September 2006 when Jodi first met Travis at a work conference in Las Vegas. He was charismatic, confident, and deeply rooted in his faith. Jodi, drawn to him and his world, converted to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that November, with Travis himself baptizing her in a Southern California ceremony. By February 2007, they were a couple. Jodi moved to Mesa, Arizona to be closer to him. Their connection burned fast, but didn't run smooth. A year and a half of on-again, off-again dating, peppered with long-distance visits between Arizona and California. In April 2008, Jodi moved back in with her grandparents in Wairika. Still, even when Travis was seeing other women, they kept up a charged, secret contact, intimate messages and photos that blurred the boundaries between ex and lover. Those closest to Travis saw trouble. Friends noticed the way Jodi acted around him, her temper, her possessiveness, the way their relationship seemed to swing from passionate to volatile without warning. More than one person warned Travis that something about her didn't feel right, but he didn't care because he loved her.
And she's over here, so I'm looking at my peripheral because I don't want to turn this way. And I'm like, shh. Because he's like,
Murder in the shower. June 4th, 2008 began like any other summer day in Mesa, Arizona. By nightfall, the master bathroom of Travis Alexander's suburban home had been transformed into a crime scene so violent that investigators would spend days piecing it together. When friends finally forced open the door to his bedroom on June 9th, they were met with the stench of decomposition and the metallic tang of blood in the air. The trail began in the hallway outside the master bath. Dark stains smeared and pooled across the carpet and tile, and ended in the shower stall, where Travis's body lay crumpled and naked, his back against the wall, his head bowed forward in an unnatural stillness. The water had long been shut off, but the drain beneath him still bore the reddish tint of diluted blood. The brutality was undeniable. The autopsy, performed by Dr. Kevin Horn, revealed 27 stab wounds scattered across his chest, back, shoulders, and head. His throat had been cut from ear to ear, the deep gash severing his jugular vein, carotid artery, and trachea. He had also been shot once in the head with a .25 caliber bullet. Horn testified that the gunshot was likely delivered after Travis was already dead or dying, not as the opening blow, but as the final act in an attack that lasted minutes. The stab wounds to his back were shallow, suggesting they were meant to control or incapacitate rather than kill. Defensive wounds marred his palms and fingers, proof that he had fought desperately to ward off the blade.
The sink, on the floor, on the walls, and it's just a tremendously violent scene.
On the bathroom floor, a single .25 caliber shell casing sat near the sink, a small but damning piece of ballistic evidence. Around the room, blood spatter told its own story. Cast-off patterns on the walls from rapid repeated stabbing, diluted streaks near the sink where water had mixed with the red, smears along the hallway wall outside the bathroom. One of those smears was a bloody palm print that, when tested, carried the DNA of both Travis Alexander and Jodi Arias. The most chilling evidence, however, came from a digital camera. Investigators found it in the washing machine, damaged but still recoverable. Forensic technicians pulled deleted images from its memory card, reconstructing a grim timeline. At 1:40 p.m. on June 4th, the camera captured a series of intimate photos of Travis and Arias in his bed. Hours later, at 5:29 p.m., the final image of Travis alive was taken. He was in the shower, water streaming down his face, his expression unreadable. Moments later, other photos recorded what appeared to be a chaotic scene on the bathroom floor. A blurred, bloodied figure, and in one frame a leg and foot, suggesting Travis had already collapsed or was being dragged. The crime scene unit worked the house for 4 days. They photographed every stain, tested every surface, and traced the path of violence from the shower to the hallway, trying to understand the sequence of events. Blood evidence indicated the attack began in the shower stall, moved out into the sink area as Travis tried to escape, and then continued into the hallway where he collapsed before his body was returned to the shower. Every recovered detail pointed to a crime that was both frenzied and deliberate. The shallow back wounds, the deep, fatal cuts to the throat, the post-mortem gunshot, the attempted destruction of evidence, all of it suggested an attack that was not simply a burst of uncontrolled rage, but a sustained, multi-stage assault. In that tiled alcove, with the sound of running water masking her first steps forward, Arias had set in motion a series of blows and cuts that left the walls, floor, and the man she once claimed to love covered in blood. It was a room that told its own story, even without a single spoken word, a story of minutes that felt like hours, of panic and pain, of a killing that would become one of the most documented and dissected murder scenes in recent American criminal history. The trial of Jodi Arias. The legal battles had started long before opening statements. In 2009, the defense failed in an attempt to disqualify the Maricopa County District Attorney's Office. That spring, the court ordered Arias to undergo IQ and competency testing. In 2011, her attorneys pushed for access to Travis Alexander's digital communications, eventually securing hundreds of text messages and thousands of emails. Detectives insisted there was nothing out of the ordinary in them, but the defense believed otherwise.
Were you at Travis's house on Wednesday?
Absolutely not. I was nowhere near Mesa. I was nowhere near Phoenix.
When jury selection began on December 10, 2012, in Judge Sherry Stevens' courtroom, the atmosphere was already tense. The defense accused prosecutor Juan Martinez of systematically striking women and black jurors. Stevens disagreed, ruling there was no bias. On January 2, 2013, the trial opened. The prosecution's version was stark. Jodi Arias was a jealous ex-girlfriend who refused to accept the end of her relationship. They argued that she had staged a burglary at her grandparents' home to steal a .25 caliber handgun, purchased gas cans to avoid leaving a paper trail, and driven to Mesa to kill Travis. The defense told a different story, one of control, fear, and abuse. They said Travis had a violent streak and that Arias killed him only after he lunged at her in anger. The state's witnesses chipped away at her claims. Ryan Burns, the man Arias visited the day after the murder, described her as acting normal. She told him her hand injuries were from broken glass at a restaurant called Margaritaville, a place investigators later confirmed didn't exist.
He went like that, and he turned his head and grabbed my waist.
Just like that, correct?
Pretty much.
And he grabbed your waist, right?
I can't say it's just like that, but that's what I remember.
Well, no, just, I want, without talking, just show me the pose.
He got down like that.
Like that?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead and have a seat then.
Then, on February 4th, 2013, Arias took the stand. She would testify for 18 days, an almost unheard-of length for a defendant in a murder trial. She spoke of abuse from her parents, her relationship with Travis, and her belief that he harbored disturbing fantasies, including pedophilic urges. She claimed he had become increasingly abusive and that the killing happened in a moment of fear after she dropped his camera, triggering a violent attack. She said she fought for her life.
Things that we were keeping from each other. He just flipped his lid, he blew up, and he threw me on the ground and got on top of me and started choking.
The defense brought in Alice Laviolette, a domestic violence expert who told jurors that Arias's behavior fit the profile of a battered woman. But when the defense tried to use emails between Travis and friends Chris and Sky Hughes as evidence, Judge Stevens ruled them inadmissible as hearsay. In those emails, Travis reportedly expressed frustration that the Hugheses had discouraged Arias from pursuing him. Chris Hughes allegedly warned that Arias could become Travis's next victim, to which Travis supposedly replied, "I am a bit of a sociopath." When Chris Hughes testified, he told a different story. Yes, Travis dated multiple women, but Arias manipulated them all, and the couple had cut her out of their lives after catching her eavesdropping on their conversations.
If you were called to testify on Miss Arias' behalf, would you be happy about that?
No, I would not.
Why not?
Because she murdered my friend in cold blood.
The prosecution countered with rebuttal witnesses, including other women who had dated Travis. All of them said the same thing. They had never known him to be violent. The result was a trial that played out like a psychological war. Two versions of the same relationship, one framed as deadly obsession, the other as desperate self-defense, each asking the jury to believe theirs was the truth. By March 2013, the trial had entered one of its most contentious phases, the battle of the experts.
Did he ever call you a whore?
No.
A slut?
No.
A three-hole wonder?
No.
Did he ever tell you how he wanted to tie you to a tree and, quote, put it in your...
No.
On March 14th, psychologist Richard Samuels took the stand for the defense. Over 6 days, he told jurors that Jodi Arias had likely been in a state of acute stress during the killing, her body locked in fight-or-flight mode. He claimed this explained her memory gaps, saying her brain had simply stopped recording events in the chaos. When a juror asked whether such a state could occur if the murder had been planned, Samuels admitted it was possible, but not probable. He also diagnosed Arias with post-traumatic stress disorder.
So it's possible, and I'm not saying that it is for sure, it's possible that the trauma she was referring to was actually due to the but because of the story she constructed, she had to attribute it to this made-up story.
Prosecutor Juan Martinez went on the offensive, suggesting Samuels had crossed professional lines, even developing a personal bias in Arias's favor. Martinez reminded the jury that Samuels had testified to feeling compassion for her, a statement the Arizona Court of Appeals would later call him out for attacking improperly. The state countered with psychologist Janine DeMart, who dismantled Samuels' conclusions. Arias, she said, wasn't a battered woman. She didn't have PTSD. Her diagnosis, borderline personality disorder, a pattern of unstable emotions, relationships, and behavior. The defense pushed back, bringing in psychologist Robert Geffner, who insisted every test Arias had taken since her arrest pointed to an anxiety disorder rooted in trauma. He criticized DeMart's use of the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, claiming it wasn't designed to detect personality disorders, and argued that the Millen Clinical Multiaxial Inventory, which Samuels had used, was more appropriate.
People with this personality profile tend to experience a lot of aggressiveness, hostility, defensiveness.
The prosecution's final expert, forensic neuropsychologist Jill Hayes, disputed that claim, insisting the MMPI could indeed identify borderline personality disorder. When closing arguments began, Martinez came at Arias hard. He called her a manipulative liar, put Alexander's own words before the jury, a text calling her evil, and flashed the gruesome crime scene photos again on the screens. This, he told them, was no accident, no moment of fear. It was a slaughter. The defense asked jurors to set aside any personal dislike for Arias and to focus on the facts. They argued that her behavior, leaving receipts for gas cans, appearing on security cameras, even spending the night with Alexander before his death, made no sense for someone supposedly on a covert mission to kill. Martinez had the last word, hammering home the sheer brutality of the attack.
You remember that we're talking about Travis Alexander. Let's start with that.
Yes, I remember that.
That's why we're here, because you right?
The trial saw 3 jurors dismissed along the way, 1 for misconduct, 1 for health reasons, and 1 after a DUI arrest. In the end, Judge Sherry Stevens instructed the remaining panel that they could convict Arias of first-degree murder if each juror, individually, believed the killing was either premeditated or committed in the course of a felony.
We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn, in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do find the defendant as to count 1, first-degree murder, guilty.
On May 8, 2013, after just 15 hours of deliberation, they returned with their decision. All 12 found her guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. 7 also agreed on felony murder. As the verdict was read, Alexander's family embraced, smiling through tears. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted, cheering and chanting. For them, it was justice. 5 years in the making. After the guilty verdict, the trial shifted into its next high-stakes battle, not over whether Jodi Arias had killed Travis Alexander, but over whether she should die for it.
I've caused them a lot of pain. I've caused my family a lot of pain. And I think that by asking for death, I'm only going to cause more pain to my family.
Under Arizona law, the prosecution had to prove that the killing was cruel, heinous, or depraved for the jury to even consider the death penalty. The aggravation phase began on May 15, 2013. The state's sole witness was the medical examiner who had performed Alexander's autopsy. Arias's attorneys, who had tried more than once to withdraw from the case, offered only short opening and closing remarks. They suggested that the adrenaline flooding Alexander's body might have dulled his pain in those final moments. Prosecutor Juan Martinez countered with something more visceral. He projected crime scene and autopsy photos on the courtroom screens, then stood in silence for 2 full minutes, the amount of time he claimed it had taken for Alexander to die. When the jurors returned after less than 3 hours, they agreed. Arias was eligible for the death penalty. The penalty phase began the very next day. Alexander's family took the stand, giving victim impact statements meant to convey the weight of his loss, the brother they'd buried, the man who would never have the life he'd been working toward.
I've had dreams of my brother, all curled up in the shower, thrown in there, left to rot for days, all alone.
On May 21st, it was Arias's turn. she stood before the jury and asked for her life. It was a sharp reversal from comments she had made in a televised interview just after her conviction, when she had said she preferred execution. Now, she told them she had gained perspective. Death, she claimed, would only add to her family's pain. She promised that, if given life in prison, she would sell T-shirts with the word survivor and donate the proceeds to domestic violence victims. She would keep cutting her hair for locks of love, something she said she had already done 3 times while awaiting trial.
But as I stand here now, I can't in good conscience ask you to sentence me to death because of them.
That night, in a joint jailhouse interview, Arias said she had no idea what the jury would decide. The verdict, she admitted, felt unreal. I felt betrayed, she said. I was hoping they would see things for what they are. 2 days later, on May 23rd, the jury returned, deadlocked. 8 favored the death penalty, 4 did not. The judge declared a mistrial for the sentencing phase. Jury foreman William Zervakos later said the decision had been crushing. The emotional weight of deciding whether someone should live or die had worn them down. By the end of it, we were mentally and emotionally exhausted, he said. We felt like we had failed.
No unanimous agreement, signed 4-person. Is this your true verdict, so say you want to know?
Yes. A mistrial.
Maricopa County Attorney Bill Montgomery announced on May 30th that he believed a new, impartial jury could be seated for a second penalty phase. But there was also the possibility that both sides, along with Alexander's family, could agree to a life sentence without parole. The defense pushed back on the death penalty entirely, noting the state's own psychologist had diagnosed Arias with a mental illness and that she had no prior criminal record. Arias herself said she still believed in the justice system, but doubted whether a truly impartial jury could be found after such relentless media coverage.
I think that'll just cause more pain. And I don't think it'll give closure to anyone, because what will happen if I get a death verdict is it will drag on and on and on through appellate courts.
The trial was far from over, but the country had already heard nearly every intimate, violent, and conflicting detail of the case. Now it would watch as the system decided how her story should end. The trial of Jodi Arias was marked not only by its graphic testimony and high public profile, but also by repeated clashes between the defense and the court, battles that would continue long after the first guilty verdict, the final verdict. Between January and May 2013, Arias's attorneys filed multiple motions for mistrial. In January, they accused lead Mesa police detective Esteban Flores of perjury, pointing to a 2009 pretrial hearing where he testified that, based on his understanding from the medical examiner, Travis Alexander had been shot in the forehead first. At trial, however, the medical examiner told jurors the gunshot likely came last after a prolonged, brutal attack, and would have quickly incapacitated Alexander had it been first. Flores denied lying, claiming he had simply misunderstood the medical examiner's earlier statements. The defense raised other concerns. On May 20th, they filed a motion alleging that a key defense witness had withdrawn from testifying after receiving death threats, threats similar to those aimed at domestic violence expert Alice Laviolette earlier in the trial. The court denied the motion, as well as a request to pause proceedings so the defense could appeal. 9 days later, the Arizona Supreme Court refused to hear a separate appeal. That appeal had challenged the cruelty aggravating factor needed for a possible death sentence, arguing it had been allowed to proceed based on a flawed theory of the crime's sequence. At the original hearing, Judge Sherry Stevens had approved the aggravating factor based on the belief that Alexander was shot first. But by trial, testimony had shifted. The gunshot was now believed to be post-mortem. The case would return to court more than a year later for a sentencing retrial. On October 21, 2014, opening statements began. The proceedings stretched into 2015, complicated by new evidence disputes. A Walmart employee who had previously testified that Arias never returned a gas can admitted she wasn't sure if all store records had been transferred after a relocation. Forensic experts also conceded that Alexander's laptop contained both viruses and pornography, contradicting their testimony from the first trial.
The bombshell allegation. One of Jodi Arias' attorneys wants all charges dismissed. They claim the state or police deleted thousands of files of pornography from Travis Alexander's computer.
Deliberations began on February 12, 2015. On March 2nd, the jury told Judge Stevens they were deadlocked. She urged them to continue, but by March 5th, after 26 hours over 5 days, the result was final, an 11-1 split in favor of death. The lone holdout refused to change her position. The majority of jurors tried to have her removed, accusing her of bias, but were unsuccessful. The fallout was immediate. The holdout juror's name, address, and phone number were leaked online, and she began receiving threats. Jury consultant Dennis Elias condemned the attacks, saying, "It is not a proud day for any single one of those people, and they should be ashamed." Maricopa County Attorney Bill Montgomery issued his own statement, calling for the harassment to stop. With the jury deadlocked for the second time, the death penalty was off the table. The decision on Arias' fate would now rest solely with the judge. When the jury deadlock removed the death penalty from the table, the final decision rested with Judge Sherry Stevens. Sentencing was set for April 7, 2015, but it wasn't until April 13th that she delivered the ruling. Jodi Arias would spend the rest of her life in prison, with no possibility of parole. By then, the cost of her legal battles had swelled to an estimated $3 million, a staggering figure for a single murder case. In June 2015, after a restitution hearing, Stevens ordered Arias to pay just over $32,000 to Travis Alexander's siblings, about a third of what they had requested.
To Samantha Alexander, $15,530.73. To Tanisha Sorensen, $10,754.90.
Arias began her sentence in the maximum security Lumley unit of Arizona State Prison Complex, Perryville. In time, she was downgraded to medium security, where she remains as inmate #281129. But the courtroom fights didn't end with her sentencing. On July 6, 2018, her new attorneys, Margaret Peg Green and Corey Engel, filed a sprawling 324-page appeal seeking to overturn her conviction.
Jodi Arias' life will now fit in a 7 by 12-foot box. Look at how big that really is, or should I say small, and imagine spending...
They returned to court on October 17, 2019, arguing before the Arizona Court of Appeals that the verdict had been tainted by the conduct of prosecutor Juan Martinez, behavior they described as inappropriate, inflammatory, and self-serving, fueling a media storm that made a fair trial impossible. The appellate judges didn't disagree with the criticism. In their March 24, 2020 ruling, they called Martinez's behavior egregious and self-promoting, but they upheld Arias' conviction, concluding that the evidence against her was so overwhelming that his misconduct had not changed the outcome. The Arizona Supreme Court declined to review the case on November 4, 2020, closing yet another chapter in a legal saga that had stretched for more than a decade. One that began with a relationship, turned into an obsession, and ended in a shower stall in Mesa, Arizona. The Jodi Arias media circus. From the start, the Jodi Arias case played out as much in the court of public opinion as it did inside the courtroom. At one point, Judge Sherry Stevens attempted to keep certain testimony behind closed doors, allowing a defense witness to testify in private as jurors weighed the death penalty. The Arizona Court of Appeals later overruled her decision, siding with the Associated Press and other media outlets who argued that the public had the right to see and hear the proceedings. Even so, the identity of that mystery witness was never revealed. By then, the trial had already become a national fixation. It had first drawn attention in 2008 when 48 Hours Mystery aired an episode on the killing, complete with an interview that would later become evidence in the death penalty trial, a first for the program. That September, speaking from the Maricopa County Jail, Arias famously told Inside Edition, "No jury is going to convict me because I am innocent. You can mark my words on that."
I can't imagine slitting anyone's throat. No jury is going to convict me.
Why not?
because I'm innocent, and you can mark my words on that one. No jury will convict me.
The Associated Press later described the spectacle as a circus and a runaway train, noting how the trial became a worldwide sensation. Cable networks carried gavel-to-gavel coverage, talk shows dissected every detail, and members of the public lined up outside the courthouse hoping for one of the few available seats in the gallery. The Toronto Star put it bluntly, with its blend of jealousy, religion, murder, and sex, the case showed exactly what happens when the justice system becomes entertainment. Even public officials weighed in. Then Arizona Governor Jan Brewer told reporters she thought Arias was guilty, though she declined to specify the degree of murder. Jury foreman William Zervakos, speaking after the trial, said Arias's marathon 18 days on the stand had likely hurt her case. I think she was not a good witness. The coverage was relentless. HLN issued press releases bragging about record ratings, with one noting the network had been #1 among cable channels when Arias pleaded for her life before the same jury that had convicted her. Social media added another volatile layer. In early 2013, Arias's brother began selling her artwork on eBay, claiming the proceeds helped the family cover trial expenses and improved her jail meals. That spring, defense witness Alice Laviolette, who testified that Arias was a victim of domestic violence, became a lightning rod. More than 500 negative reviews flooded Amazon for her not-yet-released book, leading one retired judge to call it the electronic version of a lynch mob.
Can you give me a reaction to the verdict, Jodi? Is there anything you want to say to the...
USA Today reported that during the trial's climax, Twitter and Facebook erupted with commentary, much of it aimed at Arias, but also at the media figures covering her, like HLN's Nancy Grace. Some trial followers were accused of using social platforms to intimidate witnesses, though whether it affected the case was unclear. Former Arias attorney Victoria Washington said social media also targeted the defense team, recalling how lead attorney Kirk Nurmi's face was digitally superimposed over a crime scene photo of Alexander. The hostility didn't stop at the attorneys. After the jury deadlocked on the death penalty, the foreman and even his family began receiving threats. His son wrote online about reading hate mail sent to his father, some containing full names, phone numbers, and email addresses, evidence of just how far the case's reach had extended. By April 2015, Arias's attorney, Jennifer Wilmot, was openly discussing the toll, the online harassment, the death threats, and her belief that Arias had testified truthfully. Meanwhile, Arias's Twitter account, run by friends on her behalf, remained active, even posting in June 2013, "Just don't know yet if I will plea or appeal." In the end, the Arias trial wasn't just a legal proceeding. It became a media phenomenon, a social media free-for-all, and for a time, a kind of grim national theater, where the murder of Travis Alexander played out in front of millions, and the lines between justice and entertainment blurred almost completely.
No, I mean, I had no idea. When I first came onto the case, I had never heard of Jodi's name before. I didn't even really know any of the facts of the case. I had no idea that it would...
Travis Alexander was gone. His family left to carry the weight of his loss, while Jodi Arias began serving a life sentence that would keep her behind prison walls forever. Yet, the story refused to fade. It lived on in appeals, in documentaries, in endless debates about motive, truth, and the corrosive pull of obsession. What started as a private relationship had become one of the most public tragedies in recent memory, a cautionary tale about love, manipulation, and the darkness that can hide in plain sight.